ألا من كنت مولاه فهذا علي مولاه، اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه.
My Muslim name is Hassan Ali. I'm originally from Manchester. I live in Birmingham now, although I have moved. We never came from a privileged background. I always remember my dad working through the day. We come home from school and my mum would work later on at night. I have an older brother, younger sister. It was, I suppose you'd call it a secular upbringing, although my mother would say that she's Christian. I think she'd say that she's Christian. And my dad would always say that he was atheist, although he was more of he believed in science, and if science could prove something, he would believe it. So we never had any sort of religion instilled in us as children, just the moral compass of my mum and dad, which they were good people. My mum and dad were good people. As children, we never had religion pushed on us, although my mum and dad had good values. They were homemakers. You know, you see nowadays so many broken homes, and I remember at school as a child, I was amongst all my friends, I was kind of one of the only people that had a mum and dad that were still together. There was a lot of broken homes. As a child, I kind of considered myself a Christian. I remember we used to have like a child's Bible with really, colourful Bible, very, very well illustrated. And right from that early age, I'm guessing between 8 and 11, I took the Bible probably a bit too literally, and I always believed in all the prophets, but it kind of never really stayed with me, like any sort of belief, but because of the upbringing, I think, and sort of being Church of England, which my mother is, to me it seemed like a very wishy sort of way of a religion where you can just accept this and you're saved, and it seemed like a license to do what you want, which, although at the time I never really knew it, but hindsight, looking back, you can say, well, there was always some set of rules that you do need to follow, and it never kind of made sense that Christians didn't actually follow what the book said, and the Christians that I do remember talking to through my life are kind of don't actually take the Bible literally. They kind of just take it as a set of moral, like stories to shape your own moral conduct, which kind of just seemed a bit of a weird concept, that there were no set rules. The first memory I have of praying was when I was 14, 15, and I started to get migraines. I'd wake up in the middle of the night in really, really intense pain, and that was the first time I can remember turning to God and asking for help, because short of banging my head on the wall, and I had all these coping mechanisms where I used to punch myself in the legs just to try and divert the pain away and bang my head against the wall. and you know, the only true relief really was, in fact, there wasn't any there wasn't any relief. Like medicine didn't really do anything, and I remember being like falling to sleep crying in my mum's arms, and sort of just being in utter despair about it. My mum was really upset and just kind of didn't know what to do, and religion didn't, you know, it was never discussed. In Islam we can kind of make sense of calamities that befall us in life, and like now I'm always looking to that silver lining, whereas back then it's kind of all, it was just all bad. You can't see past that. Now, that was the first time I remember praying, although I didn't pray to Jesus, ﷺ, I prayed to God, and that's how I always remembered praying. I left school, I was still living with my parents, and I started a YTS as a paint sprayer. Paint sprayer, panel beater, repairing cars, plastic cars, you name it. Over the years I've painted it. At the moment I've got a fiberglass alien at home that someone's asked me to repair and paint. It's kind of, you get asked to paint some weird things, which it was something which I could always do. It was something that I always enjoyed doing, and I've carried that on right through life. I'd never really heard of Islam before. It was only my oldest friend moved away when we were children. I suppose he must have been 12. He moved away. He ended up living in London with his mother, and we kept in touch. I'd trips down to London as I was a youth growing up, and he was always like a brother. Even back then, his mum was like a second mum to me. And he came up to Manchester with a book, Know Your Islam, and said that he'd converted to Islam, and we got into discussion about it, me and another old friend from Manchester, which it spurred us to look back at Christianity again, which as children would never really taken it that seriously. But me and my friend had kind of, we read the Bible, we spent time talking to one another about it, and that was that would kind of start. But it was a trip like that we went on with Hisham. He'd come up from London, and we decided that we would go to Wales. Like stupid teenagers, we decided that we was going to walk there from Manchester, and we kind of, in our naivety, thinking that we was prepared, we had big boots on and big massive rucksacks, and we started this walk from Wilmslow, and I think it took us 3 days, of which a lot of that walk was very, very hard. And we spoke with Hisham about religion, Christianity is what I can really remember talking about. I don't think Islam were kind of, it wasn't on our radar at that time, although we knew that he'd converted to Islam. But I think the natural thing for us to do before we got to Islam was to actually revisit what our parents were brought up to believe, which was Christianity. On the journey to Islam, I actually gained more knowledge and respect for Christianity. There was actually another incident that happened in France where we'd met the Muslim brother in the central mosque, and I was in total despair at this point. And we met this brother who took us to a place. He said, "I'll find you somewhere to stay." He put us up in an hotel for one night. Alhamdulillah, we were so relieved because we had nowhere to stay. And he put us up in an hotel. The next day he came and found us. He said, I found you somewhere to stay. He took us to this place in Paris. It just looked like a huge hotel. And as it turned out, it was a missionary run by Roman Catholics who'd done a lot of missionary work in Africa and places. And right or wrong, the story that we're told to these priests was that we was in Paris to see the Pope, because it was in '97 when the Pope visited Paris. There was a story which we didn't understand. There was a conversation in French in this doorway. Sammy had apparently told this priest that we'd come to Paris to see the Pope. Our bags had been lost or stolen. I'm not entirely sure what he told the priest, but the priest just took us in, no questions. Give us both a room and just give us the freedom to come and go. Which, looking back at that event, kind of, I can never look at Christians in a light that a lot of extreme Muslims look at Christians, where they say, yeah, they're all going to burn, and it's kind of just wrong. I can't ever believe that. It's these Christian brothers that took us in. They couldn't speak English. They fed us and just made sure that we was completely satisfied. They give us the freedom to come and go, so we could see Paris in a way which, up until that point, we'd not really seen Paris. We'd just seen the dirty streets of Paris, to be fair. I'm kind of guessing it was around 90, but between 93 and 94, perhaps 92. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I've got vague memories of even that moment of taking Shahada, where it's kind of between us, me and my friend, we'd gone on this journey looking at Christianity, and this journey led us to the Muslim Youth Foundation in Manchester, where we used to call in, sit and chat with the brothers, which was where we took Shahada. We kind of proceeded to keep attending, go to study circles. But I was always kind of very standoffish. I mean, people have always told me that I'm the sort of character that's quite hard to get to know. I've never been that open with people. I've always kept my cards very close to my chest, and sort of this were no exception at the MYF. I was there in person, but mentally, I took a step back, which I've no idea why I took a step back. me and my friend were both on the same path at that time, and he embraced everything. He was I can remember he'd phone me up, are you coming? And I used to make excuses not to go. It's like, well, no, I'm busy, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And it was kind of, for me, looking back, it was this battle of the self. The greatest jihad for a man is to fight against his own self, which was always, I always had this battle going on inside me. I had this fear of what my family would think, what my friends would think, how I would be labelled, and I think as well I actually had a fear of Muslims. And sort of in them early days, the brothers that we met were very, alhamdulillah, they were all very, very good brothers, and there was our pathway to the deen. Although I did find it very intimidating, for want of a better word. I was very reluctant. Now, whether that was a case of all these other pressures on me, I can't exactly say. But there was, I think, although at that time, what caused us to take Shahada was Islam made sense of Christianity, where when we used to read the Bible and we used to have our discussions about the Bible, it kind of didn't make sense of itself to us, where Islam seemed to explain that religion perfectly, and not in a direct sense, but it kind of opened my eyes to the bigger picture of religion and how the major religions were linked together. Initially, I remember my family kind of, they took it in a way where I kind of, they weren't angry about it. They kind of, I sensed that they actually had the feeling that perhaps they thought it was a phase that I'd grow out of. But there were no anger, there were no arguments. I actually found that the only arguments that I ever really had about Islam were kind of all instigated by myself and by my other friend. I remember we come on a trip to London, and we was very early Muslims. We're perhaps a matter of weeks, and I remember we were at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, heckling this Christian guy, and we didn't really have any knowledge, and we kind of walked away from that being told that we were both devils, and it were kind of, it was a very rough thing to try and do, I found, becoming a Muslim, because you kind of wanted everything straight away, and we'd gone 1 week being eating your bacon sandwiches to praying 5 times a day, and you made all these changes instantly, and you wanted everything now, and you wanted to shout from the rooftops, and we didn't really have the knowledge. Never mind the life experience. I mean, what I've actually found is that I've gained more in life experience. I've gained more in knowledge about Islam practically by trying to escape Islam, which sounds really bizarre, and it was kind of it was that burden that I took. I took it as a burden early on. For the best part of 10 years, I was struggling with Islam, and I was conscious. I was constantly wrestling with my own conscience. You know, I always knew that the only thing that I could do was to come back to the deen. It was kind of inevitable. I think the first thing that happened was the little trip to France that we had, where my friend in London asked me to come and stay, and he talked me into resigning my job over the phone, which I left a message on the answer phone and resigned from work, a job I'd been with since leaving school. I think at that point I'd been painting cars for about 7 years, and I left this job at the drop of an hat, and got talked into coming to France, which for my friend was, I guess it was a journey to improve his faith, to sort of reaffirm things for him. But for me, it was kind of, it was a trip with my friend, and it was actually a trip into something which I was trying to get away from. We'd gone up to the north of France and planned on spending the duration of the trip over there in a tent Hisham had borrowed from a friend the last place it had been put up was at Glastonbury, and on pitching the tent on the top of this mountain, not mountain, on top of the cliff in France, we discovered the inner lining had a 2-foot rip on the inside of it, and it was really a disgusting thing. It was absolutely horrible. But one of these proper old-fashioned tents, not a modern one like you get today with nice dome and the interlocking pieces. It was just 2 metal poles, one across the top, no frills, and we'd kind of pitched this tent on the top of this proper windswept cliff overlooking the English Channel. And on one of the first nights we were there, I think it was, we got invaded by ants, which I'm sure Hisham probably won't thank me for telling this story, and sort of he's I don't know how he feels about it. We got invaded by ants that kind of tried to get into everything. We had a bit of food in the tent. The ants had come in. There were thousands of them. They'd gone around the entire rectangle of the tent and concentrating in the corners, and then coming up to the little pole in the middle. And I couldn't stay in there. I really couldn't stay in there. And Hisham was just telling me, no, it's okay, just ignore them, we'll be okay, they won't hurt us, they're only ants. And I wasn't comfortable, so I left and said, look, I'm going to go and find somewhere to sleep, and I'll be back in the morning. And I think Hisham said to me, give it half an hour, give it 20 minutes, or something along them lines, and I'll say a prayer and ask Allah to ask him to leave. And my faith was non-existent. I was very, we were kind of weak because we'd not eaten, and we was on this windswept cliff, and the ants had invaded the tent, and I were kind of, it was another low moment in France for me, where Hisham he was alright about it, sharing the tent with the ants. So he kind of said, I'll say this prayer, you come back. Well, I said, right. I went, and I spent the night underneath a bush just curled up, freezing cold. I think we've probably all my clothes that I took with me I had on to keep warm. And what I remember to be sort of quite soon, which later I found out it was the next morning, his Sham come to get me and said, you can come back, all the ants have gone. You know, I kind of laughed. Who says a prayer that ants are going to, you know, asking Allah to ask ants to leave? And, you know, I just kind of laughed it off. Right, yeah, I kind of went with him just to look, and you know, I got back there and every single ant were gone. Every single ant. Which you could tell a non-Muslim that story and they just say, well, you know, it's kind of coincidence. You know, the ants left of their own accord, or he brushed them out of the tent. He went and got a brush, and you know, there were no evidence of him doing anything. And I believe him. He's my oldest friend. He's my oldest friend. We were brothers before Islam. We're brothers now. And you know, he said this prayer. Alhamdulillah, these ants went, which was that were kind of the first part of what happened in France. Which the next night we slept in the tent, and it started raining that night, and if I remember rightly, it rained for 15 hours constantly, and it wasn't just a light shower; it was heavy rain. Where we were both sat up for what little sleep we actually had. We kind of sat up in all our clothes, just sort of huddled, freezing cold. And when the rain finally stopped, it was just a case of everything was absolutely ruined. Everything was wrecked. So we just packed the tent up and threw it in a dustbin, and we used the facilities on this little campsite, had showers, put some wet clothes back on, and then the rest of our stuff we actually took it to a local charity shop, the rucksacks, everything, and just give it away, which was how we ended up in Paris with no bags, where we ended up at the Roman Catholic missionary. You know, that wasn't the actual point where I come back to the Deen. It was just that little poke in the arm saying, look, you know, you need to start living this Deen. You need to start learning and living it. It's kind of the only way. But I'd proceeded to bury my head in the sand. I think like the beginning of the end of that spell in hiding and running away from Islam came when my dad got ill. He got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis, which they call it the ragdoll illness, and it wrecked him. It ruined him. He'd gone from working 7 days a week. Well, not 7 days. You know, he'd gone from working every day of the week, to not being able to walk across a room, and it was kind of the more they got. It seemed like the more they got to grips with his illness, and the more they changed his medicine and things about that, he seemed to get more symptoms and he seemed to get worse and worse. And it kind of went on for about 6 years, his illness. And to the point where he'd had a couple of spells in hospital. And at that point, I think it must have been the third time or what that I remember him being in hospital, that you know, I was at home with, like, at the time I was living with my mum and well, my mum and dad, and I think my dad had been in hospital for 2 weeks, and we got a phone call in the middle of the night, and you kind of know when the phone rings at 1:30 in the morning, you know it's not going to be good news. And it was the call which nobody was expecting, because it wasn't actually, it wasn't a disease that usually kills people. But we got that phone call, and I took my mum to the hospital, met my brother and my sister there, and we told my dad had passed away, which at that time I kind of, apart from the grief, I just felt so guilty. I felt really guilty because I think for the time he was in hospital, I think I saw him twice, where sort of Islamically, you know, I should have been there. I might have done the practical things, like take my mum to get her shopping and drop her off at the hospital every night, but I kind of at that point my head was still in the sand about it, and I just didn't want to admit it. Well, that was a very hard time, and I remember shortly after my dad had passed away, the only conclusion that I come to was the only thing that I can do to help my dad now is to come back to the Deen, and that was the only thing that I could do. So which I phoned Isham up, and finally, after all them years, I was kind of ready to speak about Islam. I was ready to sort of get back on that path. After the funeral and after everything had not getting back to, you know, things don't truly get back to normal when there's a death, and in that manner it kind of brought the family closer together. And I remember talking to my mum about my dad's last moments, his last few days, and she'd gone into the hospital, and she spoke to him about everything. And you know, these like people seem to get better just before they die, where he seemed like he was getting better to my mum. I think I hope I'm not, you know, putting any sort of yeah, I hope it was like that. That's the impression that I got from my mum, that he was kind of, she didn't expect it. He was kind of, he was talking to, he was conveying all his concerns, and you know, it's sort of, as it turned out, he'd accepted my Islam before I accepted it, and you know, it was all them years of running away and keeping things secret, and when I was praying in secret and not showing that side to my parents, it was like, it really didn't matter. And I could have been a better son, I could have been a better man if I'd have actually embraced it and helped like I should have done. But you know, that were kind of hard to take. But essentially, it is what it is. And you know, if my dad accepted it, you know, he'd kind of, I think she said to me that he'd been in some conversation, and you know, he'd say, oh my son, he's a Muslim. You know, and he's like, I'm busy running away, and he's you know, unknown to me, he's saying, oh no, he's Muslim. Yeah, he's Muslim. Whereas sort of like if he'd have asked me, I'd have denied it. Yeah, this big cloud that I had hanging over me, all these anxieties about what your family are going to think, what your friends are going to think. You know, you're going to be treated in this way, you're going to be labelled like this, and alhamdulillah, it's just nothing like that at all. And you know, if I'd have been, you know, it's all ifs and buts. If I'd have embraced it earlier, you know, would I have made any difference in his life? Who knows? But I suppose the point was that I'm carrying all these fears around, and there were really no need, because he'd accepted it. He'd fully accepted it, even when I didn't. It's like the dear me. So that was actually what caused me to come back, but that wasn't the end. You know, it was kind of it was just pushing me in that direction, and it just initially got me to that conclusion. The only thing that you can do is embrace your deen again, which I kind of, all my friends saw me as running away. I had a job at the time, smart repairing, doing like a mobile painter, going around garages and fixing things for people, and I walked away from that. I give it all up after my dad died, and left Manchester. I'd spoke to Ish. I remember speaking to Isham, and I think the initial conversation was, "Are you still Muslim?" And he said, "Yeah," and it was, you know, I told him what had happened, and once the funeral was over and I got invited to, the idea were there to come to London to kind of, which I embraced. I kind of give up the job, and I kind of left for London, which all my friends in Manchester saw it as me running away, where I saw it as just a chance for me to sort of embrace Islam and practice it with some anonymity. And I just saw London as you're just another face in the crowd, and it was very easy to kind of, you know, it's very easy to pick up your deen because everyone I know in London prays. So I come to London, and that's what I did. Although, you know, there were still dark times ahead, you know, which is always, it's always gone back to this battle of the self. I decided I was going to train to be a bus driver, and I went through all these months of training. I passed my bus test, and I got a job over at Enfield Garage. And first day on the job, on the 121 route, it was doomed from the beginning. I had problems. First of all, I took over my bus. There's a wheelchair passenger on. Couldn't get the wheelchair ramp to come out. Like, yeah, every rule that they say as a bus driver, you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do this. Oh, I did it all. I had to manhandle this man in a wheelchair off the bus. I had problems with this bus. I couldn't get it into gear, and I got down to Enfield Island Village, and there's a level crossing there, and I couldn't get my bus out of park. I was the first vehicle in the line of traffic, and to make matters worse, it was, I think it was about 7:30 at night. A train had just come into the station, and all these passengers come running, banging on the door, trying to get on the bus. I'd already left the bus stop. The rules say that you're not supposed to let them on. I let them on. I let all these passengers on, and the lights changed and the barriers came up, and I couldn't get my bus into gear. And there was another bus coming the other way. So I'd opened my window and shouted to the driver, told him what the problem was, and he was like, just press the brake really hard and just bang the button down, which I did, and you can kind of hear these automatic buses go into gear. So I'd kind of got it into gear. I looked up, it was still clear. I took the handbrake off and just started, as the bus started to ride up over the level crossing, I saw the barriers out of the corner of my eye coming down the side of the bus. To which point I think bus driver training kicked in, where they say don't ever stop your bus on a railway line. So I just sailed across the crossing, not fast. I was kind of already up there, and you just let the momentum of the bus take me over, you know. To which I kind of instantly knew straight away that was my job gone straight away, first day on the job. And you know, it kind of, you know, a bus come to a stop. I'd gone through all the procedure, and the police turned up. I ended up getting arrested. They took me down to King's Cross and threw me in a cell. And, you know, it went to court. I got points on my licence, and, you know, I felt I was kind of made a bit of a scapegoat. But by the I won't name the bus company, by the bus company, which you know, inshallah, I can kind of see how, you know, that attitude that Isham had back in them days. Although initially I was devastated, I remember speaking to one of the other drivers who I'd passed my test with, and I was like, something good will come out of this, just you wait and see. And he was flabbergasted. A kind of, what good could possibly come out of this? And after that, I'd kind of, because of it, I'd left the place where I was living, and I was given a floor to sleep on over in Paddington. And I actually bought a laptop with the payoff money that the bus company give me to basically just I saw it as just to keep me quiet. You know, there was an appeal and it was all unsuccessful. But I bought a laptop which I'd joined after I'd bought a laptop. I joined a website, a marriage website. Isham had been going on for me for years and years. You need to get married. You need to get married. You do know it's after your deen. You do know it's after your deen. And it was kind of, you know, it was always right, but I was always very self-conscious about the amount of knowledge. I always felt very inadequate about what I knew, what I didn't know. And sort of in gatherings with brothers, I'd always stay kind of quiet, and I was always kind of hard to sort of engage, I think. Which I think sort of through meeting my wife, it was kind of, it led me to the realisation that you can't fully embrace Islam and your deen if you haven't got this intention to complete it by getting married. And it was kind of, you know, all these dark times that I'd had in London and things that I'd done wrong and mistakes I'd made, they were just gonna keep on happening. So it was kind of, I met my wife, Sophia. We spent a year talking, and she had 3 children, 3 girls, Ikra, Insa and Inaya. And it scared me to death. It absolutely scared me to death, the fact that she had children. And I kind of felt that I was quite irresponsible myself to a certain point, But I kind of knew that sort of the only thing to complete my deen was to get married, and we kind of spent the next year talking on via email and later on the phone, and would sit talking, reading Sistani, and just making sure, you know, she needed assurances that, you know, that you know your rights as an husband, you know, my rights, you know, the children's rights, you know, you've got this, you know, we've got this intention to move on with our deen, and to sort of, you know, the children have to come first. And after a year we decided to get married, which we did, and alhamdulillah. I remember speaking to Hisham, and he said that, you know, this journey of yours is nothing short of miraculous. The way that things had turned round for me, and people keep asking me, you know, how's this happened? How have you got to this point? And the only thing I can say is it's you've got to have that intention to change, and without any intention to change, nothing happens. You've got to have movement. It's just the law, isn't it, of physics. If something is still, nothing happens. But with movement, you have change. And we're 3 years down the line now. Well, 3 years in August down the line. And I couldn't wish for any better children. They kind of, with my wife, they do complete my deen. And they help me to be focused. And I'm responsible. Well, I hope I'm responsible, you know. But there's it's still an ongoing battle. It always will be. But you cannot call yourself a believer without being tested, can you? So but I'm happier with things now than I ever have been. And even going back to Manchester, spending time with my mum and my old friends, and like a lot of people kind of get left behind. Like I remember in the early days, I kind of told myself that I wasn't going to cut people off that didn't cut me off, and it didn't work out, because people tend to just sort of drag you back to their level. You know, I'm not wanting to sound like I'm any super pious person, because I'm not. It's just kind of, I think it all just stems from having a good intention and just sort of aspiring to be better than you are, and to want something better for someone else, like you want for yourself. Plus, as well, it keeps me concentrated on something, you know. Which if you're occupied, then everything's fine. If you know, this going back to the early days and this romantic vision of asceticism and spending your life in a cave like these Sufi saints, it's kind of like it's a million miles away from real life and what true Islam says, the way that you should live your life. It's a million miles away, and it's just totally, it's in books. And sort of like that's kind of what I found with a lot of Muslims that I've come across. Not that I'm you know, I don't wish to point fingers at anyone, if anything at myself, because I've always been that Muslim painting this picture of piety upon myself, you know, kind of without any real implementation or any real understanding. It's kind of, I feel that I'm kind of there, not there, well, getting there, heading in the right direction, as opposed to being stagnant and not doing anything and just talking about Islam, as opposed to living it. And it's, you know, all I have is Islam to make my life, to knit it all together. Islam made sense of Christianity and what I understood in the early days, and now Islam kind of helps knit the family unit together. It helps knit the community together. It knits everything together. And you know, without it, without Islam, I'd probably be dead by now.